Every day, people just like you are searching for answers to feel better, live stronger, and finally understand what their bodies are trying to say. Here on PremierU Decoded, we uncover the science behind true wellness, from hormones and metabolism to the daily habits that shape your future. Because beneath every symptom is a message your cells are sending. And when we listen, we transform. I'm Dr. Brandon Williams, and together we're building health, hope, and confidence at the cellular level.
Welcome back to Decoded, and this time we're doing it in style. If you were with us in early days, you know Decoded started in an office, just the two of us, in some really outdated chairs with just a conversation. The kind of conversations that people are already having in the gym, in their kitchen, and in group text, without all the confusion and misinformation. What we're trying to do here is make science cool. And we're officially moving on up. We've upgraded the studio, the energy, and the conversation. And we're now filming right here in our new studio at a venture unknown with Trueline Media Group. And we're so excited for this opportunity. And while I love being part of these conversations, the real reason this podcast even exists is to bring in people who actually are living and breathing this work every day. Which is why I'm excited to officially hand over the mic to the man who probably quotes more movies than anyone I know, and somehow will manage to make science sound really cool when it's really complicated at times. Brandon Williams. No pressure.
No pressure.
Brandon will be hosting Decoded moving forward and bringing in some incredible guests, expert practitioners, and thought leaders who are helping people better understand their bodies and take control of their health. I'll be helping him bring in those folks, but he will be front and center, taking this hot mic, bringing those movie quotes, the comedy, and all things cool about science, I'm sure. We're going to talk about everything from metabolic health, hormones, strength, longevity, recovery, and yes, even the topic everyone seems to be talking about right now, gut health. Is your gut health taking you hostage? Who is controlling this relationship? And we're going to talk about that. Because apparently your gut affects everything, like your metabolism, your mood, your immune system, and maybe even your patient level when you're with people on the internet and doing that doom scrolling. So Brandon, let's start decoding this whole gut health conversation. So gut health, it's become one of the most talked about topics in health right now, but it's also one of the most misunderstood. So let's start there. Hey Brandon, how much of our health actually starts in the gut?
That's a great question. So I'm going to set a sort of framework for today and the intention of this video. I think that really the reality of the gut health conversation needs to change from the focus of being symptom-based and to consider us as much larger ecosystems. I'll just get right to it. I feel like mainstream medicine, most of the people you're going to hear are going to talk about gut health as this isolated thing. And the reality is we are walking ecosystems. There's actually a term that scientists are now using to describe this phenomenon called meta-organisms.
Okay.
So we are not just individuals walking and bumbling through this world and through this life. We are entire ecosystems in and of ourselves with the organisms that are on our skin, in our bodies, and specifically as apropos today, in our gut. And how those organisms and we as individuals interact with each other can help determine whether you're going to be healthy or whether you're not going to be healthy, whether they might take over and do bad stuff to you. So my goal today is going to be able to shift the framework, the viewpoint, the paradigm of how we approach this with that in mind. There's another phrase that I like, and there's going to be a lot of phrases that I'm going to introduce today, but on purpose. So that you can look at these terms and start to shift that mindset. The reality is that there is this entire study called holobiontologics, and it is the study of exactly what I just described. How do we interact with these tiny microscopic organisms? The reality is, in your gut, there are trillions of them. They're also on your skin. They're in your mouth. They are inside your body, including things that are toxins, fungi, all kinds of other organisms, which is kind of creepy, but we do have to regard them, because if we don't, it's going to create problems. There's all kinds of different lines that science is investigating now, which has allowed this conversation to expand. And ultimately, it's broadening our knowledge. But if we stay stuck in this antiquated model where we ignore that we are an ecosystem, we will always stay back. We will always stay in a disease state because we're never going to move beyond the control that this has on our body.
Yeah. So all of us listening, we have a gut. We have a stomach.
We hope.
Right?
Yeah.
We hope we do, right? These are important things. So for a lot of like the professionals who are hearing that was like, Brandon, tell me more. That's exciting. Let's get into those studies. But for folks like us who are sitting back and saying, what the heck did that guy just say?
Yeah.
Let's break it down.
Sure.
Right? So when you think about what are bad with the stomach, things that come in contact with us, what are the bad things that we need to be aware of?
Sure. Well, I'm going to make it worse because the reality is this is another hard part, and people are going to be very frustrated with me on this topic.
Yeah.
Because there is not a good way to create a protocol. There is no one answer is the right answer for everybody. The hardest part about being somebody that sees patients for gut health is being at peace with the fact that what is meant to be normal or healthy does not necessarily apply to everybody. And I'm going to give some specific examples of that, but we all have friends, family members, or maybe ourselves who just don't do well with the thing that somebody else said, well, this is the healthy way to be. This is the healthy thing to eat. Diet, what you put in your body, how you react to it, it is super complicated. It is very, very difficult to create protocols based off of that. And everybody wants something that is very simplistic, magic bullet. But the reality is it can't be like that. And so that's where people are going to get frustrated. But the reality is, what I want to reinforce is that you have a provider, person that you create a relationship with, who's willing to work with you and to consider you as an individual and to consider you as this ecosystem. And I think that will move us all forward. If we can shift in medicine toward that sort of mindset to patient care, I think we're all going to excel and move beyond this, again, antiquated model of how do we deliver healthcare? How do we change people?
Well, even in the intro, we talked about this being such an important topic to decode because people are getting their information everywhere and talking about that misinformation. So online, right, when we see all these different supplements and all these things we can take, where do people start to even know, do I have an issue? Or are they creating more of a problem to themselves before they get to that practitioner, that provider, because they're not truly understanding what their gut is telling them and what they need about that misinformation?
So thinking about that, the reality is I want for people to think about this side, that they're being more intuitive with their bodies, to pay attention to it. It's okay to just listen to your body and to report those symptoms and to be okay with, and I'll hearken back to this, something not working for you. It might work for your sibling. It might work for your spouse, your neighbor, but it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to work for you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay for your body to be different because the reality is you're different. Even your sibling, your genetics, they're a little bit different from yours. We are all individuals, and we all have this microbiome that's really sort of like a fingerprint. It is very unique and individual to us, and our pattern of our organisms and all these little bugs are a little bit different in me versus you versus anybody else. And that's okay. And we have to, as providers and as patients, we have to be okay with responding differently to different things. And that's where the relationship with a good provider, a coach, a mentor, somebody who can help you take you through, how do I correct this very complicated system in my body to help my whole person be better? And additionally, to consider it that the gut is so important for everything else in our bodies, that we shouldn't just relegate it to, that's just the tube that manages stuff that I put in, right? You want to think about the stuff you're putting in, definitively, but it can't just be relegated to this other system where you eat and you poop and that's it, and that's where it ends. It's much, much more complicated than that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great. So when we think about it's bigger than just eating and getting rid of it, right? How does poor gut health show up in our body? Because some people might think it's indigestion, right? I have poor gut health because I don't feel good after I eat certain things, or it shows up in different ways. But poor gut health can show up in different ways, even outside of just the stomach, can it not?
Sure. I mean, you can have, you got pain. You can have bloating, gas, diarrhea, constipation, a mixture of both of those. But you can also develop cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
There are direct links between a gut dysbiosis, gut mismanagement, an inappropriate relationship to cardiovascular disease, to chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, neurodegenerative disease, all kinds of cancers. And it's about the pattern. It's the environment that we're creating in our bodies it's a complicated dance. It is a symphony and an orchestra that has to work well together. And if something goes awry, maybe the conductor can fix it quickly.
Yeah.
But if the entire brass section starts to go off and play a different song, you're going to have a major problem, and the audience is going to notice it, the audience being your body in this case, and maybe your friends who are going to smell or hear you or see you change.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's back to, if we're going to keep it into a music analogy here, right? So, when someone gets up at a bar and grabs a microphone and starts singing karaoke, it can go one of two ways, right? People are like, yeah, go to Nashville, do your thing. Or they go, please sit down, right?
Right.
So I almost see that as someone kind of just freewheeling on their phone at night saying, I'm having some of these symptoms. I'm hearing what he's saying, but this influencer says I can do this, or I should take this probiotic, or all these things. But you could end up being that person who picked up that microphone singing that karaoke song that's not going to go well. You could do more damage, if I'm hearing you correctly, than helping if you are misinformed or you're just freewheeling your own health.
Right. No, like with me, I'm very confident that in the shower I sound exactly like Mariah Carey. But it's possible that other people don't hear it that way.
Right.
Right. So yes, I mean that's the difficulty, is if you take there's the difficulties of people have bias. We want to make things simple, and simple is good, and a population wants things simple. When you take a complicated topic and you tell people it's not so simple, they almost don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
And they do want something that is simple. They want a protocol. And the reality is, for most people, maybe that protocol works. But there are also 10, 15, 20% of the population for whom it does not work, or makes them worse and leads to disease states. But even in the people for whom that protocol might work, it could be done better, potentially. And so it's really looking at the entire landscape of the tools available and considering, as the provider, how am I interacting inside that body, and what I'm doing to them, how is that affecting them, and how is it affecting other parts of their body, other systems in their body too.
Yeah. So to summarize that up, put the mic down.
Yeah.
Put the mic down.
Yeah.
Don't get up there and sing that song at the top of your lungs. I mean, Cyndi Lauper, Girls Just Want to Have Fun. I've tried it a couple times. She hits that high note. Doesn't matter how hard I try, I just can't quite do it.
Yep.
So this is not a solo act, right? This sounds like you're in a band and you got to know what the melody is. And so doing it alone can be kind of dangerous, right? So it is knowing what the song is, joining in, and working together on it, because the gut is not such a simplistic song to sing.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll give a correlate real quick. I'm going to bring in a movie quote.
I love this.
So as I was thinking about this, it sort of struck me. So thinking about, there's a metabolite. This is an important factor. So I'll say two things. There's a phrase we've all heard, which is, you are what you eat.
Yes.
The reality is, you are what you feed your microbiome and they feed you. That's really what we are. There are all these metabolites that happen from your microbiome breaking down these food products that you put in your body. And those things can be good or they can be bad. And it depends on, when those metabolites go out into the rest of you, what the rest of your body looks like. Yeah. So there is something that we measure that has been highly linked to cardiovascular disease. Things often go back to cardiovascular disease because it's such a prevalent problem.
Yeah.
And people are concerned about it, as they should be. It's expensive and it takes people's lives. There's this metabolite called TMAO, or TMA. Trimethylamine oxide is that metabolite. Now, in a normal system, it's fine. It passes right by. So the movie quote is, when Maverick is in the jet and he's got the guy who's tailing him, he says, I'll put on the brakes and he'll fly right by. So what your body will do is they'll take that metabolite and kick it right out. No big deal. But if that metabolite exists in a system that is highly inflammatory, and specifically, just to be nerdy for a second, in the setting of something called NF-kappa B, which our audience will hear me talk about multiple times, it creates massive inflammatory cascade changes in your body. If TMAO exists in that system, it will lead to cardiovascular disease. So this is the important point to talk about is these metabolites can be fine or they can be bad, depending on what's the rest of the environment look like.
Yeah. So it sounds like it could end up being like the first Top Gun. That didn't end so well.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So it either could pass on by
Right.
or
you get caught up in the jet wash and then boom. Yeah,
Right,
we got
right.
problems. Yeah.
And for all of our Taylor Swift fans, he did not say opalite. He said metabolite. So
I don't even know what that means.
I
I'm
know.
sorry to say. But
and I'm sorry to
I'll
say that
Google
you
that.
don't,
Yeah.
that clearly you're not a Swiftie, and I will not hold that against you.
I'm not.
But for all of our Swifties out there, yes, it was not opalite. Well, you know what? Let's get back to the next question, because I could go on forever on this, but I think it's important that, we hear a lot that 70% of the immune system lives in the gut. Is that true? And is that why people are connecting gut health to inflammation, fatigue, and even brain fog?
Yep, exactly. So you asked that question before, and I probably didn't go far enough to talk about all the other ways that gut dysfunction can present itself. Brain fog, this mysterious, I just don't feel myself. I'm not as sharp as I used to be. And there are other conditions that go along with brain fog, like fibromyalgia is one of those. We all know somebody, if you look at them, like most people know what fibromyalgia is, or they see it in real life of, that person probably has fibromyalgia. We as providers do that all the time. But brain fog can manifest in so many different ways. The reality of it is most of those are a cellular energy problem. Now, without going too far down that line and talking about that, just basically to think of that our cells are not able to use fuel appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
They become weak as a result. They're not doing their jobs. I think of them like little factories. And just like a factory, there have to be deliverers to factory. There have to be people to work the machines. There have to be machines. There have to be people to maintain those machines. They make the widgets. Those widgets get packaged.
Mm-hmm.
Those widgets leave the factory.
Yeah.
That's an appropriately functioning factory. And there are also the janitorial services that are cleaning up after all of these other things. If you start taking pieces of that out, if you take the janitorial service away, it's going to lead to dysfunction of that factory. Something as simple as one small change can be majorly impactful in that. And that happens in our brains. And that's what leads to things like brain fog. We stop using fuel, the things that we put in our body. We can't figure out how to process it correctly. Our cells run low on energy, and no amount of Alani, Monster, or C4 in the world is going to change that.
Yeah.
And often they make that worse because they're demanding more of those cells, but the cells are like, bro, I don't have it.
Yeah.
You got to help me out here. And you're just overtaxing that system. But that can come from the gut, right? We put our primary fuel source outside of the sun. We are solar powered. I will give credit to that. But we get our primary fuel sources from the things we take into our body. And again, that can be good or bad, depending on what you're doing.
People usually have more than one thing going on, right?
Yep.
It's not just a gut health thing. It's just not a hormone thing. Usually it's a lot of things that come on when people come to you.
Yeah.
So say when, you have a woman maybe in mid-40s who comes to see you and they're talking about gut health, but you also know in that mid-40s, there's a hormone issue and you're hearing inflammation, you're hearing brain fog, you're hearing mood, right? All the things you talked about with the gut, but how can you start to manage multifaceted parts of this? Because we know it's not just the gut at times.
Sure. And that's the complicated part.
Yeah.
And that's where standard medicine misses it typically. That's my opinion. You have to look at all of those things, right? You could just balance hormones and that patient might get some better. They may not get completely better. So then the next question is, okay, how do we take that further? In a lot of places in medicine, it's just, oh, well, you're not sick and in the hospital, so you're fine.
Yeah.
But for most people, that's not good enough. It's not good enough for me. I expect a lot out of myself. And most people want to feel optimal. They don't want to just not feel sick.
Yeah.
Those are very different things. And to be healthy and to thrive. in life. So you have to be the kind of person who's willing to interact with those multiple systems, the hormones, as you mentioned. Obviously,
Right.
that can wreak havoc, or it can be really good and beautiful, depending on how it's managed. And then if you need additional support, you can look to, okay, maybe my gut is contributing to that. Maybe it's just as simple as I don't sleep enough. Are you exercising? These other pillars that we
Yes.
have to have in place, but to orchestrate in a way that you're managing all of those things, or at least giving them consideration. And I think a lot of times in our world of, and not to keep criticizing standard medicine, but we've all experienced this where we go to our doc, and the reality is they don't have time to see you in a comprehensive way. You get to talk about one problem, and
Mhm.
you've got 10 minutes. And
Yeah.
there is no way that those people, God love them, could do a comprehensive job. They just can't. And that's a major problem too. But I think the patient needs to, I want them to be empowered. That's the point of this, right? A lot of providers are probably not going to watch a podcast because they think, I know what they're talking about. But I hope that the patients do. And I hope that people feel empowered by this information and can take some ownership, but also to find other partners for them that help support that idea.
Yeah. And I love that. That's when we started talking about this podcast. You bring, of course, a wealth of knowledge. There's things that you say, and I'm like, that is so cool. I wish I really understood what he just said, but it sounds super cool. But I walk away always feeling smarter in the conversation because I feel empowered in my own health. And I think that's the thing. I just had a conversation with a woman this week that said, we were talking about hormones, and she said she went into her well woman visit, and the provider basically said, here are like the 4 things we can discuss. If it's anything more than these 4 things,
I mean, that's,
but there was not like,
wow.
you choose your own 4. There wasn't like a pick 4, right?
Okay.
These are the 4 things we can talk about. If outside of that, you'll have to make another appointment.
Sure.
And when she did, she said she got a bill for $400 because it wasn't covered under the well women visit. So I think there's many women and men listening to this who are trying to free will their health because they've had that run-in, right? They've tried to have that conversation. And to your point, it's not structured like that, right? This is not a, hey, let's get down to the root cause issues and talk about individualized care. So people are frustrated. So they are going to their phones, are going to the www to figure out, how do I best become my best self? So people who are listening to this, and like you said, these are probably not the providers. These are the people who are just hungry for information. If they're sitting back and saying, yes, Brandon, I get it. I hear you. I am frustrated. I want to learn more and I don't want to free will my health. How do I find someone that will have this conversation? So how do the listeners, because they can be listening to this wherever, how do they know they're having the right conversation with the right person and feel empowered to have that conversation?
Yeah, I think the best way, I've thought about that question because we get that question a lot of, how do I find, like we'll be at speaking engagements, how do I find a provider like you? That's a great question. And without being like, like, well, just come see us, but maybe then they're not near us, right? Or they just want to search for their own answers. I think it has to, and what I hope will happen with this show, with this podcast, is that people start to get empowered. They start to change how they look at things. I introduce new topics to them, like I do with our staff. I'll say, I'm going to say things that are just going to sound alien, but eventually those are going to make sense. And the puzzle will start to get put together. But I'm going to give you breadcrumbs along the way. You'll start to develop this language. This is a different kind of language to communicate about health. And I think what can happen, to get to your question, is that patients can start to tell whether their provider has a grasp of this format or if they don't. And if they can have this kind of a conversation and they can create nuance and dive down pathways and understand how things truly work versus just being a symptom-based treatment paradigm, they'll be able to notice that. They have to know that they can look for it and that there are people out there who don't function that way. Most patients don't get to experience that. So they've never seen what that means exactly, but it's always well, I've got acid reflux. Okay, well, here's a PPI, right? Versus, why do you have acid reflux? Let's think about that. There could be 20 different things, and we need to try to investigate those things. And it could be as simple as how you're breathing, diaphragm breathing, these other things, all the way up through, you've got H. pylori. And you've got some dysbiosis going on. There's other things that are happening for you. So you have to have somebody who's willing to have that conversation and could interact with those questions, and that the patient can feel empowered to ask them.
Yeah.
And if that provider can't answer them in a way that makes sense and has nuance, find a different one.
Yeah. So H. pylori enters the group chat a lot.
Yeah.
For people who are listening to this and go, I've heard of that culprit before, H. pylori. What is H. pylori and how does it become, and when does it become an issue?
Yeah. So H. pylori is an organism.
Mhm.
It's a strain. It's really opportunistic. It is something that it's very prevalent, but if you have a system that is dysfunctional, it's going to be allowed to propagate.
Yeah.
And that is true of this idea. We use this idea of, most people have heard of gut dysbiosis. You will hear that, or you're going to hear that if you're in this space at all the way up through small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. And really what that is, the way that I view them is, it's not per se that you've been exposed to those organisms abnormally, it's that they were allowed to proliferate.
Yeah.
They were in an environment that encouraged too many of them to grow. There was not enough control placed. I don't like looking at things as either good or bad.
Mhm.
I think that that's far too reductive. Another one would be like LDL and HDL, the good versus the bad, or the bad versus the good. That's also too reductive.
Right.
It leaves out too many important details if you look at it that way. But we have to create an environment, again, that is conducive to the more positive things, anti-inflammatory things, the things that need to provide us with fuel, being able to predominate and not letting these other actors take over. Because if left uncontrolled, they will ultimately. And that can be a bad thing for sure.
So how does food play a part?
Sure.
Right? So people talk about allergies, right? I'm gluten intolerant. I'm lactose intolerant. And a lot of times people will just guess sometimes. I eat bread and I feel yucky. So I'll just give it up, right? Maybe then getting to the why. It could be, but I think to your point, figuring out the why of why this is happening, where do people start with that? Because I think food allergies and those sort of things are prevalent in conversations and also on social media. How do people start with, how do I process food? How do I react to food? What's my body doing when I'm consuming?
So I'm gonna answer it a little bit different, and I'm gonna come towards that. So when I'm seeing a patient who's complaining of gut-related issues, the reality is, anytime I see a patient, I ask them, what are your goals?
Yeah.
I need to know what your goals are. And that helps to inform me of what you want to focus on, because it's about them. It's about you, right? If you're the patient, I only care about you. It's not about me, right? The second part is, and this is one of my favorite providers uses this phrase, and I love it. What are you willing to do? That's an important thing for a patient to answer. And I will tell you, a lot of patients don't really know what that means. And they will say, well, I want to do it all. Let's do everything. And then me, because you've met me, I'll list everything. And they're like, oh my God, I thought this was going to be like 3 things. You just listed like 12. Can you write all that crap down and like let me look at it and stuff?
And where's that magic pill?
Right. And which is fine too, right? Because it could just be overwhelming.
Yeah.
But those 2 things have to happen. And then predicated on that, we can use things like, the simple thing, and I will tell you, as somebody who's been through restriction diets, talks about them with other patients and have patients that use them, restriction diets are very difficult. They're hard to adhere to. Life gets in the way.
Yeah.
It's difficult to know, and like, oh crap, I got exposed to dairy's in everything. To try to cut dairy out is very hard because it just sneaks into stuff. Like, why is it in here? I don't understand. It's a drink. Why is it in this thing? So that stuff becomes difficult, but you can use tools like testing. Like, I love stool testing.
That's weird.
I know, and it's weird, but hey, if you want to know,
you gotta have a thing.
What it looks like in this tube, getting the output of that tube is the best way to know what's happening up in here, right? And you get all these other health markers. You get what is my organism pattern, and you can look at that and start making assertions about it. But you can also get understanding of, how is my body reacting to gluten or gliadin? Get these anti-gliadin markers. You can look for leaky gut syndrome. You measure something called zonulin. You look for calprotectin. You look at pancreatic enzyme output. These are the things that help us not only what's your microbiome look like, but what does the exocrine portion of your gut look like? These things that you're putting in there to help you digest proteins, fats, and carbs. And how does the membrane integrity,
Yeah.
right? How's the gut functioning? Is it pissed or is it actually doing okay?
Yeah.
Right? And it might be something that's simple, like, honestly, your gut looks pretty good. Let's focus elsewhere. Let's not worry about that too much. It could be as simple as you don't really need to restrict yourself from any particular food group. We have to change the entire distribution of the macros that you're eating, right? So that's where things like high protein diets or ketogenic or Mediterranean, that's where those things come into play. And those are not one size fits all. I will tell you the research on ketogenic diets is very good, but that doesn't apply to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things have to be looked at. And again, it's a pattern. It starts with, what are your goals from this? How do you feel, right? What are you looking to feel like after we do something better than this? And what are you willing to do? And then you move through some testing to look at these things and say, okay, what are some reasonable approaches we can make that are small incremental changes to get you to where you want to be?
Yeah. I think this is great because he said a lot of big words, let's be honest. And you might think, how am I going to remember all of these things? That was really good. And how am I going to go back and look at this and look for this? But I think what I heard you say, though, is be empowering, advocate for yourself, ask the right questions. You don't need to know all the fancy words, but you need to be with someone who's willing to have these conversations with those fancy words, right?
Yeah.
For you to actually be able to talk about how you're feeling. Maybe it's what you're eating. Maybe it's just coming and being very open and honest and saying, guess what? I've decided to do all of these supplements because this guy on this podcast told me to do it, right? I think it's being honest. It's finding that person to have the conversation. And what I heard you say is, if you're not having that conversation, find someone who will, right? And be able to walk away from that, but quit the guessing.
Yeah.
So this is your baby, right? Decoded is something, man, I started with PremierU about 2 years ago, and you said, I want to do a podcast. And I said, oh God, not a podcast.
Nobody give him a microphone.
Please don't give him a microphone. Because it's a lot of work. And we're so excited to be in this great studio to bring great quality content. But gut health is so important to you. And as you said, we could talk for days about this, and we're not. But I don't want you in this podcast, this episode about gut health, without kind of just turning the microphone over to you. Yep. What is one thing that we haven't covered that you would feel so disappointed if I didn't ask you, that you wanted to get across to this audience about gut health and the importance? What would that be?
Ooh, man, to tie that down to one thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to do like a 1A, 1B, 1C situation.
Like a 3-part answer,
yes, it's gonna,
but put it all up in one?
Yes,
okay, I
because
see you.
It is related to each other, but they're all correlated. But so we have to work on sleep.
Sleep, yeah.
I always talk about it, right? And it's one of those major problems that people just think, well, my sleep sucks, but everybody else's does too. Right? But there are actionable steps that can be made about that. So we always talk about sleep.
Yep.
Without that, things just aren't going to work right. You're not going to recover. So that's 1A.
I like it.
1B would be to think about managing stress. I thought about going into this today, and I think it's probably too much for this particular episode, but to talk about the very interesting research that is coming out that relates to gut health, cancer, and neurodegenerative disease as it relates specifically to stress and certain markers and enzyme pathways that are getting noticed as it relates to just stressful states during the day. So I'd be remiss not to talk about it. And I will tell you, I am not awesome at this part of it, but I do recommend it and I see the power of it. But to work on mindfulness and meditation. My wife will be so happy that I just said that. Recognizing that I'm a human too, and that this is hard. And when I talk to patients, telling them like, look, I get it. I go on restrictive diets. I have to change my diet, paying attention to things. I'm a human. I'm not perfect. We're just doing the best that we can. But to try to create a pattern that is changing, how can I control? How can I use my mind in a favorable way versus letting my stress run me?
Yeah.
And that goes back to the environment part. And I guess third would be, again, to harken back to that idea that we have to pay attention to our bodies and how we interact with things. I often think about that as it relates to like fiber, for instance, right? Everybody talks about fiber. Fiber is important. but not everybody tolerates fiber, and not everybody tolerates the same kind of fiber. And there's numerous different kinds. And fiber, just by definition, means something that's not digestible, but it doesn't mean your body's not using it.
Yeah.
Your gut organisms are using fiber to create metabolites that feed your cells and to create other molecular signaling metabolites, right, that are going out into your body and doing things. But you can't say, just everybody needs to have this much fiber and of this type, right? So like there's the different kinds of, in a basic sense, insoluble versus soluble.
Right.
When you think of insoluble, that's the stuff that won't dissolve in water and it bulks your poop, right? It's used like that. That's metamucil. The soluble is the stuff that becomes clear. That's like benefiber. There have been some really interesting research studies done on those different things. So the point being, though, is that even inulin, which is a soluble fiber, depending on your dose, could be a good thing or it could be catastrophic for you. Yeah. And to quote Top Gun again, because I have to, my favorite quote from that movie, my wife actually recently asked me this, is when Maverick is talking to Slider after he's hit on the instructor, and he looked at him and said, "Slider, you stink." And if your family members have said that to you, it could be that you're not using the right type of fiber for you.
Yeah.
Maybe this good fiber doesn't work well in your body, or maybe your body's not ready for that, or it's not ready for that quantity. Again, so 1C would be to say it's okay if something that is meant to be healthy or everybody else says is healthy doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
Again, it could be that you're just not ready for it, or that your body's never going to relate to that thing in the other ways that your family members do, even if they're your siblings, your spouse, or whomever, and that's okay.
Yeah. So 1A, B, and C, sleep.
Yep.
Right? And sleep is important for all things, for health, for recovery. We talk about cognition. Sleep is something that, I'm even wearing an Oura ring, right? To track sleep. We're all about sleep, but a lot of people are not figuring out how to sleep better. We can have awareness, but what are you going to do with that?
And we're going to have a whole episode on that for sure.
A whole episode
Not necessarily that thing, but sleep.
Right. Sleep, but it's true. Because there's a reason why these wearables and things are out there. We are now waking up to thinking about sleep, but what are we going to do about it? We're not having it. What do we do? So a recovery score, a lot of these wearables will say, your sleep was this is your recovery score. Well, you have the data. Now what are you going to do with it? Yeah. Right? Stress is so easy to say, but what are you going to do? And so many people say that this is just my life. This is just how it is. Until we stop and think about how we can make those micro steps towards change, nothing's going to happen. Yeah. We see that all the time, even at our clinic, right? And people say, where do I start? It starts with just making that first step. Yep. And do all of it. You got to start somewhere. Yep. And the last one I love, again, everybody poops. I love what you said about the fiber, though.
Hopefully, if you don't,
that's a real problem, right? But I love that thing about the smell. All I can think about is like silent but deadly. When people say, "Did something just die?" I love your idea of maybe it is the wrong time, right? The wrong type of fiber, because I don't think I've ever thought about it like that. Versus, man, your food's fighting back with you, right? But these are very important things for us to think about. And this is what we're going to be doing in Decoded. As I said, Brandon's going to be taking over this mic and he's going to do a great job. I'm going to help with him bringing in these fantastic thought leaders, experts, just having these great conversations, because it's beyond just doing the doom scrolling at night and trying to figure out what's happening. It's beyond wearing the wearables and not doing doing anything with that information. It's really collaborative. It's finding that person to have that right information with. Yeah. So Brandon, how do you feel about this new studio?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're going to elevate the experience.
Yes.
The sound is going to be great. We love this team. But our goal isn't to change every trend or every supplement. It's really to help you understand how your body is relying on you and what you can do to help support it. So we're going to be bringing you lots of important topics. What could be a little preview? What do you think could be next? What could be the next topic?
Oh, that's good. So I think what's going to be next is I want to do a deep dive with one of our providers. Many of you may know Jordan Kimmler.
Yeah.
And honestly, I already told her this, and it's funny. She thought it was hilarious that I said, I'm going to fanboy a little bit. Because as providers, we don't get to spend time with each other. Outside of training, you have somebody else that you firmly respect. But I see the patients that she sees in a different way. Maybe I see them for something else, but I don't get to be in those visits with her.
Yeah.
So I want to crawl in her mind a little bit.
Ooh, this sounds exciting.
And she's very good at responding. You know her. She's as quick-witted as they come. But she's got this incredible grasp of people, and her ability to understand other people is phenomenal. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
Of course, I want to do cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative disease, but bring it into a level that is impactful for people, because that's the kind of stuff that scares people.
Yeah. And
to make there be actionable steps better than today. Today was one of those, I want to change a framework. In those other conversations, I want to create treatment strategies and a little bit better protocols. I didn't want to do that today because I knew it was going to be too much.
Yeah.
And additionally, I want to talk about metabolic health and things that are not medicine-based, things that are, how are we approaching exercise, how to help with sleep, to give these actionable steps to change your life in ways that don't include taking a pill or taking a shot.
Yeah.
And ultimately, also to how to make those things work better for you. They're just messaging tools, but you have to put them in a good environment. So those are things that I think that's the next few episodes coming up. And then we'll be bringing in some other guests that are very cool.
That does sound exciting. And you're in for a treat. Jordan Kimmler, nurse practitioner at PremierU. She's amazing. I know personally she has changed my life from a hormone optimization standpoint. Being in my late 40s, I know you probably thought I wasn't a day over 25. Thank you so much. But she's really changed because she's really validated me as a woman, as a mother, as a career woman, that this is just not stress. This is not how it's supposed to be. She really gives you tools, and talk about someone who's a cheerleader. So that's going to be an amazing message. So thank you for joining us for this episode of Decoded. We've talked about gut health, but follow us, share this, communicate with us. What do you like? What would you like to hear more? Tell someone else to listen to this, because we want to give you real tools. Because with Decoded, we make science cool again. So I'm Shannon Shores. I'm signing off. I'll be behind the scenes, but thank you for your time and great job, partner. We did it. Episode 3, it's done. Thank you.